Her hand struck sharp across my face. The sound cut through the boutique like a gunshot. Crystal gowns glittered under the lights while my sister stood on a platform in white, her eyes cold, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Just leave. You're ruining my moment. The sales clerk froze. My mother looked away. No one said a word. But what none of them knew, not my sister, not the staff clapping for her fantasy, was that every inch of silk, every reservation, every vendor smiling at her demands sat on my credit card. Months of combat pay, reinlistment bonuses, double shifts on base. All of it funding a wedding that wasn't mine. My cheek burned where she'd hit me, but my hands stayed steady as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. One button. Card blocked. What she didn't know was that the dream she was living had just turned into a nightmare she'd have to face alone. I walked into the bridal boutique in Charleston carrying my sister's oversized designer bag like I was hauling gear across base. The place smelled of expensive perfume and steamed satin, soft music drifting over rows of gowns that shimmered under bright lights. Bridesmaids whispered over racks of lace and champagne tulle. I was the only one in army boots beneath all that sparkle. The leather scarfed from months of wear that had nothing to do with weddings. My sister Celeste stood on a raised platform in front of mirrored walls, twirling in a crystal-covered gown like she was auditioning for royalty. Our mother Lorraine clapped and gushed about how stunning she looked. The sales staff hovered around her as if she were a celebrity. Nobody even glanced at me except when they needed something fetched or moved. I was invisible until I was useful. Celeste snapped her fingers without looking at me. Sloane. The veil. The one with the beading. Hurry up. You're so slow. Her voice carried across the boutique, sharp enough to make a few heads turn. I bit down on the inside of my cheek. Being barked at in formation never fazed me. Sergeants yelled orders, and you followed them because it kept people alive. But being ordered around by my younger sister in a wedding dress, treated like hired help in front of strangers, that stung differently. I grabbed the veil from the rack and walked back toward her platform. She didn't even glance at me, just held out her hand like I was supposed to know exactly where to place it. Here, I said, keeping my tone even, the way I'd learned to do under pressure. She spun toward me, her eyes cutting into mine with a look I'd seen before, the look that said I was in her way. Then she slapped me, hard. The sound echoed through the boutique. A few gasps followed. One of the cousins dropped her phone. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Celeste's voice sliced through the pause, cold and dismissive. Just leave. You're ruining my moment. She turned back toward the mirror, lifting her chin like nothing had happened, like slapping me in public was just another part of her day. Heat shot up my neck. My face burned where her hand had landed, but I stayed still. Years of training had taught me how to keep my cool under fire. It didn't stop the humiliation from crawling under my skin, but it kept me from reacting. People stared, then pretended not to. The sales clerk shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. My mother looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nobody said a word. Nobody asked if I was okay. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply set the veil on the edge of the platform and walked out. The door chime rang softly as I stepped into the Charleston heat, as if this were just another shopping trip gone slightly wrong. Outside, the cool air hit my burning cheek. I stood under the awning for a moment, breathing in the smell of street coffee and exhaust, my hands shaking even though my mind was clear. I'd been slapped before during training, accidentally, during drills. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was family. What no one inside that boutique knew, not my sister, not my mother, not the eager staff still fussing over Celeste, was that the entire fantasy they were applauding sat on my credit card. Months of combat pay had gone straight from my army account into deposits for her dress, the venue, the caterer, the flowers, even the flights for out-of-town relatives. I'd been covering for everyone quietly while working double shifts and saving scraps for myself, telling myself it was temporary, that family helped family, that she'd appreciate it eventually. The one day I took off from base to help her shop turned into a public slap in the face. I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumbed open my banking app and stared at the numbers. Her dream wedding was still sitting on my dime. She was inside waving around a piece of plastic she thought was magically loaded with family money. It wasn't. It was my name, my savings, my future she was spending without a second thought. I scrolled to the account settings. My thumb hovered over the option. For a second, I hesitated. Then I thought about the slap, the way she'd dismissed me, the months of silent transfers and thankless spending. I hit lock card. A red banner appeared across the screen. Card blocked. All transactions declined. No drama. No fireworks. Just a button and a decision. Years of military training had made me good at decisive action, at making calls under pressure and sticking with them. My pulse slowed a little as I slid the phone back into my pocket. Through the window, I could still see Celeste at the counter with the dress draped over her arms. Her face was flushed, animated as she gestured at the gown. Her voice rose, sharp enough to carry through the glass, as she told the clerk to run the card again. Lorraine stood behind her, whispering urgently, probably telling her to stay calm, that everything would be fine. The manager folded his arms, expression blank, clearly unimpressed. They'd seen brides like her before, the kind who expected everything to bend to their will. I almost laughed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Notification. Transaction declined. $20,350. Everly & Co. Bridal. I leaned against the brick wall outside, feeling the sting on my cheek begin to fade. Inside, Celeste kept waving the card like it was a magic wand that would make the machine obey her. Another decline. Her voice pitched higher, audible even from where I stood. A group of shoppers paused to glance at the commotion before moving on. The manager said something I couldn't hear and gestured toward the dress. Celeste's jaw dropped, her expression shifting from confident to panicked. She turned to our mother, demanding she fix it. Lorraine's eyes flicked toward the door, probably wondering where I'd gone, whether I could still be summoned to solve this. I stepped farther down the sidewalk, letting the boutique door swing shut behind me, the distance growing with each step. For the first time in years, my shoulders felt a fraction lighter, as if a weight I'd been carrying without fully realizing it had started to lift. My phone buzzed again with another decline notification, then another. It vibrated like a drumbeat in my pocket. I started walking toward my truck parked down the street, the Charleston sun glaring off the hood. My boots clicked on the pavement, the sound steady, familiar, grounding. People passed by holding iced coffees, carrying shopping bags, living their ordinary lives. None of them had any idea that a wedding fantasy was collapsing just a few feet away, that months of planning and spending were unraveling in real time. As I reached the crosswalk, another notification popped up. Balance overdue. Maplewood Manor will cancel reservation in 48 hours if payment not received. The venue was already lining up the dominoes. Soon the message would land in Celeste's inbox instead of mine. I stopped at the curb and looked back at the boutique one last time. Behind the glass, Celeste was still arguing, gesturing wildly. Lorraine was on her phone, probably trying to call me. The sales staff was starting to lose patience, their polite smiles fading into something more businesslike. The crystal gown glinted under the lights like a prize slipping through her fingers. My cheek still tingled where she'd hit me, but it wasn't fear or shame anymore. It was something colder, steadier. Clarity. I opened my notes app and typed a quick reminder to call my unit's admin office about my leave paperwork. If there was one thing the Army taught me, it was to take care of business on time, to handle your responsibilities before they became problems. Celeste had no idea the ground beneath her was about to give way. And for once, I wasn't going to catch her when she fell. I crossed the street, the sound of car horns and seagulls filling the air. Another buzz from my phone. The caterer. Payment overdue. The vendors were lining up, one by one, realizing the checks wouldn't clear. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. My boots solid on the pavement. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I just kept moving, the boutique shrinking behind me, the Charleston skyline stretching ahead. The slap still echoed in my mind, but it didn't shake me. All it did was flip a switch I should have flipped a long time ago, the switch that said no more, that said I deserved better than being someone's silent ATM. The hum of traffic faded as I turned down a side street and slid into my truck. My hand steadied on the steering wheel. I started the engine, the low rumble grounding me, pulling me back into the present. Without thinking, I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a crumpled stack of receipts. Venue deposits, catering invoices, plane tickets, they were all in my name, the corners worn from being stuffed into my uniform pockets on base. Looking at them now, I wondered why I'd kept them. Maybe to remind myself it wasn't magic money like Celeste thought. It was sweat, hours, and sand in my boots. It was missed meals and overtime shifts and deployments where I'd sent money home instead of saving for myself. I threw the stack back into the glove compartment and stared out the windshield. The last few years flickered through my mind like a muted newsreel. Long flights into combat zones, sleeping in tents with 20 other people, the air thick with heat and dust. Pulling double guard shifts and using the extra pay to wire money home, telling myself it was temporary, that it mattered, that I was helping. My Reinlistment bonus hit my account, and within a week, it was gone. Split into deposits for Celeste's engagement party, down payment on Maplewood Manor. A photographer she absolutely had to have. Every month, I watched my balance drop while listening to her talk about our parents' generosity, about how lucky she was to have such supportive family. I never corrected her. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as she was happy. Back then, I convinced myself it was temporary, that she'd pay me back eventually. That family was supposed to help family. I'd go back to base and she'd send texts full of hearts and "you're the best big sis," and I'd transfer another lump sum without hesitation. When I got promoted to sergeant, I didn't celebrate. I didn't go out with my unit or take leave. I used the back pay to cover her bachelorette trip to Miami. She posted photos of cocktails on yachts and sunset cruises. I sat in a plywood office filling out supply requests, sweating through my uniform. Now my phone buzzed again with another payment overdue notice. I watched the screen light up and then let it go dark. My own rent on base was paid. My car was paid off. My credit was still good because I hadn't missed a bill yet. But my savings account was a skeleton, picked clean to fund a wedding I wasn't even invited to sit at as a guest. Celeste had told me I could help greet people at the door instead, as if that were an honor. That was when I stopped pretending any of this was normal. I shifted into drive and pulled onto the road, the Charleston skyline fading behind me. My cheek didn't sting anymore. It felt almost numb, as if the physical pain had been replaced by something else, something clearer. I rolled down the window and let the humid air hit my face, the smell of salt water drifting in from the marshes. My pulse matched the rhythm of the tires on the road. There was no one to tell what I'd just done. No one from my unit knew how deep I'd gotten into my family's mess. When we were deployed, soldiers joked about sending money home like it was a badge of honor, a sign you were taking care of your people. I never told them mine was for a wedding dress and champagne fountains. A red light stopped me and I sat there drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, the sound reminding me of the barracks at night when I'd scroll through my phone transferring money, telling myself it was fine, that this was what good sisters did. I remembered the first time she'd asked me to pay a deposit. Just a small favor, she'd said. It wasn't small, but I wired it anyway because she was my sister and I wanted her to be happy. After that, the requests kept coming, wrapped in phrases like, "You're the only one we can count on, and we'll pay you back soon." I wasn't naive. I knew the numbers. I knew how long it took to earn every dollar in a uniform under a burning sun in the middle of nowhere. I just ignored the knot in my stomach because I thought it was my job to keep everything afloat, to be the responsible one, the reliable one. In my head, I heard the voices from leadership classes. Discipline is holding the line. Somehow, I'd held the line everywhere except at home. The light turned green, and I drove toward a stretch of marsh where the road opened up and the water reflected the sky. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She'd probably be furious, demanding to know what happened to the card, telling me I'd embarrassed them in front of everyone. The thought didn't even make my pulse jump. I turned onto a quieter road, pulled into a small park by the water, and stopped under a live oak. The air smelled of salt and mud, thick and heavy. I sat there for a long moment with the engine off, feeling the quiet press in around me. A jogger passed by with earbuds in, oblivious. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Normal life moved on while a whole wedding imploded a few miles away. I opened my phone again and scrolled through the list of payments I'd made over the past year. The numbers were brutally clear now. 20,000 for the dress, 10 for the venue deposit, another 8 for catering, 4 for flowers, 2 for the engagement dinner, 3 for the bachelorette weekend in Miami. On and on it went, an endless stream of transfers that had drained me dry. I could have bought a house. Instead, I'd bought a fantasy for someone who slapped me in public and told me to leave. A part of me wanted to feel regret for locking the card, to second-guess the decision. But nothing came. What I felt was a strange calm, the kind that hits right after you've finally done the thing you've been avoiding, the thing you knew you needed to do but kept putting off. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense. It was just stopping. It was a line finally held, a boundary finally drawn. I scrolled to my leave paperwork and double-checked the dates. 2 more weeks of leave, enough time to clear my head before reporting back for ranger assessment. I'd been putting that packet together quietly, not telling anyone at home because I knew they'd find a way to make it about them. To ask for one more thing, one more favor. If I got into ranger school, it would mean longer training, more deployments, but also a step up, a way out of this endless cycle of being the family wallet. I locked the screen and leaned back against the seat. The tree overhead rustled in the breeze. Across the water, boats moved slowly, their wakes trailing behind them in gentle arcs. My phone vibrated again, insistent. A text from Celeste this time. Card's not working. Call me now. Then another. This isn't funny. I'm at the counter. Everyone's watching. Then a third, angrier. You better fix this right now. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat without replying. I wasn't going to fix it. Not anymore. The days of scrambling to solve her problems were over. The hum of insects rose and fell around me. I watched a crab skitter across the mud and disappear into a hole, its movements quick and purposeful. Somewhere behind me, a radio played a country song about coming home, the lyrics drifting through the warm air. Coming home wasn't supposed to feel like a battlefield, but here I was, sitting in my truck planning my next move like it was a mission. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my duffel bag. Inside was my uniform, neatly folded, boots polished out of habit. Even on leave, I kept everything ready, maintained to standard. My fingers brushed over the patch on the sleeve, the airborne wings I'd earned through blood, sweat, and more jumps than I could count. For years, I'd been proud to send money home, thinking it meant I was doing something noble, something that mattered. Now it just felt like a weight I'd been carrying without noticing, a burden I'd picked up willingly but never set down. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Celeste lighting up the lock screen. The manager is asking for the dress back. Mom's freaking out. Call me now. I watched the words fade as the screen went dark again. I started the engine, the sound breaking the stillness. My hands felt steady on the wheel, certain. There was nothing dramatic about it. No grand speech. No big plan. Just a quiet decision made and carried out. Pulling out of the park, I merged back onto the main road, passing a billboard for a chain restaurant advertising family meals, all you can eat. I snorted at the irony. Family meals? Sure. Ahead, the highway stretched out toward Fort Bragg. The road familiar and welcoming. The sun broke through the clouds, glare hitting the windshield. My cheek no longer burned. My jaw had unclenched. I didn't think about the boutique or the stairs or the slap. I just drove, the phone silent now for a blessed moment. The city sliding by as if nothing had happened. As if the world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. A gust of warm air rushed into the cab as I opened the window wider. At a gas station, I pulled in and tossed an empty coffee cup into a trash bin. The engine idled while my phone lit up again, the screen showing a cascade of notifications. Transaction declined. Everly & Co. Balance overdue. Maplewood Manor. Payment overdue. Charleston Catering Company. They came one after another like small controlled explosions, each one a piece of the fantasy crumbling. I swiped them away without opening a single one. Somewhere downtown, Celeste was still inside the boutique, and I could picture her perfectly. The way she'd try to keep her voice low at first. Then snap at the clerk as the card refused to go through again and again. I knew that look she got when things didn't go her way, eyes wide with disbelief, jaw tight, voice rising until everyone turned to stare. Our mother would be standing behind her, whispering urgently about family embarrassment while reaching for her phone to call me, to demand I fix this immediately. The phone vibrated again, an incoming call from Lorraine. I let it ring, watching the screen light up and then fade. After a moment, it stopped. Then it started again immediately, insistent. I answered before it could hit voicemail, just to end the relentless buzzing. Sloane. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass, laced with panic and anger. What did you do? Do you know your sister's dress was declined? She's standing here completely humiliated. Everyone is looking at us. I kept my tone flat, emotionless. That's not my problem. What do you mean it's not your problem? You've embarrassed us. You need to call the bank right now and fix this. Fix what exactly? There's nothing to fix. That was my card. I've been paying for everything. Her dress, the engagement dinner, the deposit for the venue, the caterer, the flowers. Every single thing she's been bragging about is on my dime. Silence filled the line, broken only by muffled voices on her end. People asking questions she couldn't answer. Then Lorraine's voice came back, trembling but still angry. You selfish girl. How dare you cancel the card right before the wedding? How dare you do this to your sister? I let out a small, bitter laugh. Selfish. I've been funding a wedding that isn't even mine. I've drained my savings while she treats me like a servant. Do you even realize what I've sacrificed? Do you have any idea how many double shifts I've worked? How many deployments I've sent money home from? Another voice cut in, shrill and frantic. Celeste had grabbed the phone from our mother. You're jealous. That's what this is. You've always been jealous of me because I have a life and you don't. You think ruining my wedding will make you happy? Guess what, Sloane? It won't. Everyone will still choose me over you. They always have. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. From now on, Celeste, you fund your own wedding. Consider this my final gift to you. I hung up and dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. The gas pump clicked off. I replaced the nozzle and slid back into the driver's seat, my hands steady on the wheel, my breathing even. Outside the windshield, a family walked toward the convenience store, laughing together, their kids holding colourful slushies. Ordinary life rolled on, unaware and unconcerned. I pulled back onto the road, notifications still stacking up on my phone like an avalanche. Another decline at Everly & Co. Another overdue notice from the florist. I turned the radio up to drown out the buzzing, letting classic rock fill the cab. Something about breaking free, about finding your own way. The irony wasn't lost on me. Images of the boutique floated back, unbidden. Celeste waving the card, so sure the money would always be there, so confident in her entitlement. The clerk's increasingly blank expression. The manager crossing his arms, clearly done with the drama. She'd been so certain the account was bottomless that our parents were covering it all. Now she'd have to look at the truth in front of an audience. The same audience she'd humiliated me in front of. A red light stopped me at an intersection. I rested my forearms on the steering wheel and took a slow breath. Across the street, a group of Marines in uniform came out of a sandwich shop, laughing, punching each other's shoulders. They looked free, unburdened. I remembered sitting in dusty tents overseas, transferring money from the same phone I held now while my squad mates joked and played cards. The contrast was almost comical. The light turned green and I drove on. My phone buzzed again, a text from a cousin. Hey, is it true the wedding is off? Heard the caterer pulled out? Another from an aunt. Maplewood Manor is calling about an unpaid balance. What's happening? The family grapevine was working overtime. I didn't answer either message. Up ahead, the road curved along the marsh, and I slowed slightly, rolling the window down farther. The scent of salt water and mud washed in, thick and alive. My cheek no longer ached. Instead, there was a faint satisfaction settling into my chest. Not gloating, just clarity. I pictured Celeste at that counter, her voice rising with each declined transaction. Run it again. There must be money on that card. The manager, polite but firm, explaining store policy that they couldn't hold the dress without payment. Our mother on the phone with me, demanding I fix it, threatening consequences. Everyone in the boutique slowly realizing the bride had no way to pay for the gown she'd already posted about online, already shown off to her friends. My phone buzzed again with another email alert. Charleston Catering Company. Check returned. Insufficient funds. Vendors were lining up like dominoes, falling one after another. It wasn't me pulling strings or orchestrating chaos. It was simply gravity finally doing its job, reality catching up to fantasy. I reached a pull-off near the water and parked, the engine ticking as it cooled. My reflection stared back from the dark screen of my phone. I turned it face down deliberately. Across the marsh, birds wheeled and dove, their cries sharp in the afternoon air. A breeze rattled the dry grass along the water's edge. It struck me how quiet my own head felt, how calm. No mental calculations about which bill to pay next. No justifications for one more transfer. No telling myself just one more payment and then I'll stop. The decision had been made with a simple tap of my thumb, and now the fallout belonged to someone else. A memory surfaced from last month on base. A buddy had been joking around saying, "Man, you're always wiring money home. Your sister better name her first kid after you." I'd laughed along, playing it off. None of them knew how true it was, how much I'd actually been sending, how little was left for myself. My phone vibrated again, persistent as ever. Celeste. Caterer cancelled. Venue threatening to cancel too. Answer me right now. Then another from Lorraine. You're destroying this family. You need to call me back immediately. I let them pile up, unread and unanswered. Through the windshield, the sky widened into a pale blue expanse streaked with thin clouds. A shrimp boat moved slowly across the water, its nets trailing. The world outside my phone screen kept going, steady and indifferent to the chaos unfolding in Charleston. I started the truck again and eased back onto the road, the tires humming against the asphalt. The radio played an advertisement for a wedding expo coming to town next month. I snorted and turned the volume down. The timing was almost too perfect. My hands felt solid on the wheel. My breathing matched to the steady rhythm of the drive. As the highway opened up before me, I passed a billboard for Fort Bragg, home of the airborne. My eyes flicked to it briefly, then back to the road. In 2 weeks, I'd be back there for Ranger assessment, pushing myself harder than I ever had, testing limits I didn't even know I had. That was my future. What was collapsing in Charleston behind me was not. The phone buzzed once more, another notification scrolling across the screen. Maplewood Manor. Reservation will be cancelled within 48 hours, if balance not received. I didn't tap it. I didn't need to. The message was clear enough. The truck rolled on, tires steady against the road, the marshland sliding past in shades of green and gold. A faint smile tugged at the corner of my mouth, unbidden but genuine. For years I'd been the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who kept everything running behind the scenes. Now, for the first time, the weight was shifting off my shoulders without me having to lift a finger. I adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of my own eyes. They looked different somehow. Clearer. The sun sat low and sharp behind me, casting long shadows across the road. Ahead, the highway stretched straight and open, the air heavy with the smell of salt and diesel. The notifications stopped buzzing for a moment, granting me a brief pocket of silence. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, steady and calm, as I drove on towards something that felt finally like mine. I pulled into the driveway of the small rental house I'd taken for my leave and killed the engine. The quiet hit me first, profound and complete. No chatter from other soldiers, no barked orders, no humming refrigerators like the ones on base that never shut off. Just cicadas and the distant whir of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. I grabbed my duffel from the passenger seat and headed inside, boots thudding softly on the wooden steps. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and old wood, still unfamiliar but mine for now, a space that belonged to no one else. My phone lit up before I'd even set the bag down, the screen glowing insistently. 10 missed calls from Lorraine, 5 from Celeste, 2 from my father Mitchell. A dozen texts stacked up on the lock screen like warning lights on a control panel. I scrolled through one. Lorraine? Mitchell says you've gone too far. Call us now. This isn't over. Another from Celeste. You're going to pay for this. We'll sue if we have to. You can't just walk away. From Mitchell. You're tearing this family apart. We need to talk immediately. I tossed the phone on the kitchen table and went to the sink, filling a glass with water. The cold ran over my fingers before I drank, the routine automatic. Wash hands, drink water, breathe. The same sequence I'd done after patrols overseas, after long shifts, after anything that required me to reset and center myself. The difference was there had been an actual mission then, actual stakes. Not wedding invoices and family drama. The phone buzzed again, rattling against the table. I picked it up and hit speaker, bracing myself. Mitchell's voice came through heavy and hard, no greeting. Sloan, what the hell are you doing? Your sister's crying. Your mother's hysterical. The vendors are calling us demanding payment. They say you cancelled everything. Fix this before it's too late. I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice steady. There's nothing to fix, Dad. I'm not paying anymore. That's final. You made commitments, he snapped. These are contracts. People are counting on this. No. I sent money quietly when you all asked. Every deposit, every dinner, every dress fitting. But not one of those contracts has my name on it. You and Celeste signed them. Your names are on the paperwork. I'm done. A sharp intake of breath on the line. We raised you better than this. You're supposed to be the responsible one, the one who helps. I am being responsible, I said, my tone flat. For my own life for once, for my own future. There was a pause, heavy and tense. Then his voice dropped to a low growl. If you think you can humiliate this family and just walk away without consequences, you're mistaken. I didn't humiliate anyone, I cut in calmly. I just stopped funding a lie, one that you all participated in willingly. The line went silent except for a faint echo of voices in the background. Lorraine saying something urgent, Celeste's muffled sobs. Then a click. Call ended. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly through my nose, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. Years of saying yes had built a wall around me, a prison of my own making. One no, and it was as if I'd detonated a charge, blown the whole structure apart. I rinsed the glass and set it on the counter, then opened my duffel and pulled out my running shoes. I needed the road under my feet more than I needed another argument, more than I needed to hear their justifications and accusations. Outside, the evening heat pressed down like a heavy blanket. I laced up my shoes and started at a steady jog through the quiet neighborhood, letting my body fall into the familiar rhythm. Houses blurred past, flags fluttering on porches, sprinklers ticking in slow arcs over front lawns. My muscles settled into the rhythm quickly, the tension in my chest beginning to loosen with each stride. In my head, I saw flashbacks of childhood summers. Celeste asking for toys, me handing mine over without complaint. Our parents smiling at her as if my generosity was simply expected, as if it was my job to make her happy. It had seemed normal then, natural even. Now it felt like a script I'd been handed without my consent, a role I'd never auditioned for but had been playing my entire life. I turned a corner and pushed my pace faster, lungs pulling in the heavy, humid air. On base, we ran in formation, boots slapping pavement in perfect unison, the sound almost meditative. Here it was just me and the sound of my own breath, my own heartbeat. The knot in my chest loosened a little more with each stride. My phone vibrated against my hip in the running pouch, but I ignored it, focusing on the road ahead, on the simple act of moving forward. When I finally slowed to a walk, sweat running down my temples and soaking through my shirt, I pulled out the phone. Another message from Celeste. "You've ruined everything. I'll see you in court if you don't fix this by tomorrow morning." Another from Lorraine. "The caterer cancelled. Relatives are asking what's happening. This is all on you. We're being humiliated because of you." I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, the moisture cool against my skin. Threats of lawsuits made me almost laugh out loud. There was no contract with my name on it, no legal obligation. I'd sent money voluntarily, out of love and duty and a misplaced sense of responsibility. They could scream all they wanted, threaten all they liked. They couldn't force me to open my account again. I walked back toward the house, the streetlights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled. Kids played basketball in a driveway, their voices carrying through the warm air. A dog barked from behind a fence. The ordinary scene felt like a different planet compared to the hysteria vibrating through my phone, the two worlds existing side by side but completely separate. Inside, I peeled off my running shoes and sat at the small kitchen table, scrolling through my email with deliberate calm. A message from Charleston Catering Company. "Your check has been returned for insufficient funds. Please remit payment within 24 hours or the contract will be cancelled." Another from Maplewood Manor. "Final notice. Unpaid balance of $9,800. Another from the florist. "Contract void due to non-payment." They were all addressed to Celeste or my parents, but because I'd been the one actually paying up until now, the vendors had copied me on everything. I clicked each one open and read calmly, methodically. No rush of guilt anymore. No scramble to transfer funds or make panicked calls. Just facts. Simple business facts. No payment meant no service. That was how the world worked. I closed the laptop and pushed it aside. A memory surfaced from my last deployment, sharp and clear. We'd been pinned down by a sudden dust storm, visibility dropping to nothing. We'd had to hunker down in the dark and wait it out, unable to move forward or back. One of the guys had joked through his mask, "Sometimes you don't fight the storm. You let it blow itself out." That's what this felt like now. A storm they'd built with my money, with my silence, was blowing itself out. And I was finally safe from it. I poured another glass of water and drank slowly, letting the cool liquid settle me. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't reach for it immediately. I let the sound fill the room until it stopped, until the silence returned. Through the window, the street glowed under the sodium lamps, everything cast in an orange hue. Across the way, a neighbor sat on his porch, smoking, scrolling through his phone. Everything ordinary. Everything continuing as it always had. I thought about the training run I'd just completed, the steady pace I'd maintained, the way my breathing had fallen into rhythm without conscious effort. For the first time in years, there had been no new invoice waiting for me at the finish line. No text asking for money, no guilt pressing down on me. I grabbed a towel from the counter and wiped my face, the fabric rough against my skin. The clock on the stove ticked softly, marking time in a way that felt almost peaceful. In 2 weeks, I'd be back at Fort Bragg in uniform. doing something that actually mattered, working toward a goal that was mine alone. The contrast to this kitchen full of buzzing messages and family drama couldn't be sharper. I moved to the window and leaned against the frame, looking out at the quiet street, at the lives unfolding in the houses around me. The glow from inside my rental cast my reflection faintly on the glass. Short hair pulled back, strong shoulders squared, a faint red mark still barely visible on my cheek, already fading. I didn't look like someone who'd just been threatened with lawsuits and family exile. I looked like someone who'd finally stopped being used. The phone lit up again with a new text from Celeste. Garrett is asking questions now. He wants to know who was really paying. You're ruining my life. This is all your fault. I watched the message appear and then fade as the screen dimmed. The house stayed quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I let my hands rest on the windowsill, the wood cool against my palms grounding me. Out on the street, the lawnmower had finally stopped. The cicadas buzzed louder in the sudden silence, filling the air with their rhythmic song. Somewhere down the block, a TV played a game show through an open window, the sound of applause and laughter drifting through the evening air. Life going on, normal and unbothered, without me needing to fund it or fix it or manage it. I stayed there a moment longer, the phone still blinking faintly on the table behind me, and drew a slow, deep breath through my nose. The air smelled of cut grass and summer heat, familiar and comforting. My shoulders dropped another inch, the tension I'd been carrying for months continuing to drain away. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden. Just the first quiet evening I'd had in a long time, without reaching for my wallet or checking my balance or bracing for the next request. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the kitchen table in sharp angles and the smell of coffee drifting from the pot I'd set on a timer the night before. My phone was already vibrating where I'd left it, the screen lighting up with each new notification. I poured a mug of coffee and sat down, scrolling through the messages without opening them. Contract cancelled. Magnolia flowers. Final notice. Coastal photography. Payment overdue. Low country string quartet. Each one was addressed to Celeste or my parents, but copied to me as if the vendors had finally figured out who'd been footing the bill all along. I sipped the coffee slowly, letting the warmth spread through me, and stared at the stack of digital messages. This was no longer just one failed payment. It was a chain reaction, each vendor realizing the money wasn't coming, each one pulling their services and moving on to clients who could actually pay. I pictured the florist cancelling the order, pulling the centerpieces from her schedule, the photographer erasing Celeste's date from her calendar and booking someone else, the musicians accepting another event instead. Quiet, efficient, professional. No drama on their end, just business. My phone buzzed again with a string of texts from relatives. Is the wedding still on? We already booked flights and hotels. Heard the venue is cancelling. What's going on? Can someone please explain? I set the mug down and rubbed my temples, feeling the beginning of a headache forming behind my eyes. I hadn't answered any of them yet, and I wasn't planning to. It wasn't my job to explain, to manage the fallout, to smooth things over. That responsibility belonged to the people who'd created this mess in the first place. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and headed outside. The morning was already warm, humidity thick in the air. I jogged down to the small community gym I'd scouted the day before, a place frequented mostly by retirees and off-duty military. A handful of older men were on the treadmills watching cable news. I found an empty lane at the indoor range in the back, the familiar smell of gun oil hitting me as I unpacked my pistol from its case. Sliding on ear protection felt almost like sliding back into uniform, like returning to a version of myself that made sense. I loaded the magazine, aimed downrange, and squeezed off a few rounds. Each shot echoed sharp and controlled in the enclosed space, the rhythm steadying my breathing, clearing my mind. Out here, no one cared about wedding drama or who paid for what or who slapped whom. Targets didn't lie. They didn't throw tantrums or make demands. They either showed hits or they didn't. Simple, clear, honest. When I finished, I cleared my weapon methodically and packed it up. My hands steady and practiced. Sweat dampened the back of my shirt, but my head felt clearer than it had in months. On the way out, I caught my reflection in a mirror by the water fountain. Hair pulled back in a tight bun. Eyes focused and calm. Not a bridesmaid. Not a bank account. A soldier on leave maintaining her skills, preparing for what came next. Back at the house, my phone was lit up like a distress flare. Celeste. The caterer says contract void. Do something now. Fix this immediately. Another from Lorraine. People in the family chat are asking questions. You need to answer them. This is getting out of control. From Mitchell. You've embarrassed us enough. Fix this mess or there will be consequences. I placed the phone face down on the table deliberately and poured another mug of coffee. The second one of the morning. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, each second marked and accounted for. Across the street, a man loaded tools into a pickup truck, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. Ordinary life continuing as it always did, indifferent to the chaos unfolding in my family. An hour later, a cousin called. I let it go to voicemail, listening to the message after it came through. Her voice was tentative, confused. Hey Sloan, it's Rebecca. Look, Garrett's family is asking why nothing's been paid. We all thought your parents were covering everything. What's actually going on? Can you call me back? I opened my laptop and checked my bank account out of habit, out of years of compulsive monitoring. For once, the number hadn't dropped overnight. It sat there, still lower than I'd like, but not bleeding anymore. It felt like looking at a wound that had finally scabbed over, painful but healing. Another email came in from Maplewood Manor. Reservation will be cancelled within 24 hours if payment not received. They'd copied Garrett's parents this time. The ripple was spreading wider, pulling more people into the truth. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, my hands resting flat on the table. The kitchen smelled of coffee and the faint scent of cut grass drifting in through the open window. My shoulders felt loose, my breathing even. This wasn't a plan I'd orchestrated. It was simply the absence of one. For years, I'd been the safety net, catching everyone as they fell. Now gravity was doing its work, and I was letting it. The phone buzzed with a new text. This one from Garrett himself. Can you call me? Need to clarify something about the payments. I stared at the message for a long moment but didn't type a reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that conversation, wasn't sure what I'd say. I went to the fridge, pulled out leftover chicken from last night, and ate it cold over the sink. The simple act of feeding myself without thinking about someone else's bills feeling almost foreign. Through the window, I could see kids riding bikes down the street, their laughter carrying on the warm air. The sun was already high, burning off the last of the morning haze. My boots sat by the door, still dusty from the shooting range. The patch on my duffel caught the light from the window. Airborne wings earned through jumps that had terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I ran a thumb over the embroidered fabric, remembering the last jump, the rush of air and noise, the moment before landing when everything became sharp and real and immediate. My phone chimed again, breaking my thoughts. Celeste. I'm not kidding. Garrett is furious. He's threatening to call it off. Fix this or he's gone. Another from Lorraine. We didn't raise you to be cruel. We raised you to care about family. Another from Mitchell, shorter this time. Family comes first. Always has. Always will. I placed the phone back on the table, screen down, and opened the window wider to let more air in. The cicadas outside hummed louder in the midday heat, their song almost hypnotic. Somewhere a dog barked, sharp and insistent. I filled a glass with cold water and drank it slowly, watching the light play across the kitchen floor. My cheek had lost its faint red mark completely now. My hands no longer trembled when I scrolled through messages. I wasn't thinking about revenge or vindication. I was thinking about breakfast tomorrow, about training next week, about the paperwork I needed to file. The rest was just noise, static I could finally tune out. Another email popped up on the laptop screen, which I'd left open. Return check notification. Magnolia flowers. I clicked it open, skimmed the professional but firm language, and closed it again. Vendors pulling out one by one. Quiet and final, making room in their schedules for clients who could actually pay them. I went back to my duffel and pulled out my Ranger assessment packet. The papers crisp and official. I double-checked the forms, the dates, making sure everything was in order. 2 weeks left of leave. The training schedule was tucked neatly inside. A roadmap to something that belonged entirely to me. A car pulled into the driveway next door, neighbors chatting as they unloaded groceries, their voices carrying through the open window. Normal life unfolding at its own pace. I poured the last of the coffee into my mug and sat again at the table, the wood solid under my elbows. The phone buzzed with another message from Garrett. Need to talk. This is important. Please call when you can. It sat there on the screen, glowing against the wood surface. I took a slow sip from the mug, watching the steam rise and curl in the shaft of sunlight. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking seconds that belonged only to me. Outside, the shadows shifted across the lawn as the sun moved higher. My breathing matched the rhythm of the clock, steady and even, anchored in the present moment. I glanced at the screen once more, Garrett's message still waiting unanswered. The mug was warm in my hands, the coffee bitter but grounding. The air smelled of salt and summer heat drifting through the open window, mixing with the faint scent of pine cleaner from the floor. My shoulders stayed level, relaxed in a way they hadn't been in months. The phone buzzed again, insistent and demanding. But my hands didn't move toward it. I held the mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms, and let the sound fade into the background noise of the day. Just another small disturbance in a world that was finally, blessedly, my own. The phone buzzed yet again, Garrett's name staying on the screen longer this time, the vibration rattling the table until it nearly slid off the edge. I caught it before it fell and pressed answer without putting it on speaker, bracing myself. His voice came through low and strained, careful. "Sloane, I need to know the truth. Did you really pay for everything? The venue? The food, the engagement dinner? All of it?" I leaned back in the chair, staring at a crack in the ceiling plaster. "Yes, every bit of it. Celeste hasn't paid a dime. My parents haven't either. It's been me from the beginning." He was silent for a beat, then another. I could hear movement on his end, maybe him pacing. Maybe running a hand through his hair the way people do when they're processing bad news. "She told me her family was handling everything," he finally said. "She swore money wasn't an issue. She made it sound like your parents were so generous, so supportive. Do you know how humiliating it was to find out in front of my own parents that none of the payments were real?" My tone stayed calm, measured. I didn't ask to be her banker. I just wanted to help. And then it became impossible to stop. "I trusted her," Garrett said, his voice cracking slightly. "But lying about something this big, about money, about the foundation of our wedding, it makes me wonder what else she's lied about. What else I don't know." Before I could answer, there was a shuffle and muffled voices. Then Celeste's voice burst through the line, high and sharp and desperate. "Garrett, don't listen to her. She's jealous. She's always hated me because I have a life and she doesn't. She's trying to destroy us. She wants to ruin everything." Garrett's voice cut through, colder now, more controlled. "Enough, Celeste. I saw the receipts. I'm not stupid. You told me your parents were paying, and now I find out it was your sister's savings, money she earned overseas. Money she should have been saving for herself. How could you think any of this was okay?" "I was going to pay her back," Celeste cried, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. She's making this worse than it is. She's turning you against me." "I understand perfectly," Garrett said, his tone final. "We're about to start a marriage, and it's built on lies. Massive lies." "I can't do this." Celeste's voice rose to a shriek. "She's poisoning you against me. She wants to ruin my wedding because she's bitter and alone. She's always been bitter." I sat quietly, letting the noise run its course. Letting them fight it out without my interference. Garrett didn't sound like a man being poisoned or manipulated. He sounded like a man waking up to reality, seeing clearly for the first time. Finally, he spoke again, directly to me. "Sloane, thank you for telling me the truth. I appreciate your honesty." Then the line clicked dead. I set the phone down on the table. The kitchen went suddenly too quiet. The absence of their voices leaving a vacuum. Outside, a truck rumbled past and a dog barked at it reflexively. My pulse stayed steady, my breathing even. I picked up my coffee mug and drained the last lukewarm sip, the bitterness sharp on my tongue. For a moment, I thought about calling one of my friends from base, someone who'd understand, but then decided against it. There was nothing that needed explaining, nothing that required outside validation. I'd done what I needed to do. I moved to the sink and washed the mug slowly, methodically, the sound of water against porcelain steady and soothing. Across the street, the neighbor was watering his lawn, the arc of the sprinkler catching afternoon sunlight and throwing tiny rainbows. Ordinary and beautiful in its simplicity. My phone buzzed again, a rapid-fire string of texts from Celeste filling the screen. Each one more frantic than the last. "You're ruining my life." He's furious. "Fix this right now." "I swear I'll sue. Everyone will hate you for this. You've destroyed everything." I put the phone face down on the counter without reading the rest, and walked to the living room. My duffel sat open where I'd left it, uniform folded neatly inside, ready for when I needed it. I checked the ranger assessment paperwork again, making sure everything was in order, that all the signatures were done, that the dates lined up correctly. 2 more weeks and I'd be back at Fort Bragg. back in an environment that made sense, where effort was rewarded and lies didn't fly. Another vibration rattled the phone on the counter. This time, a voicemail notification from Garrett's mother. I played it on speaker, her voice coming through quiet and shocked. "Sloane, we just learned that it was your money funding everything. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding." We had no idea. No anger in her tone, just genuine surprise and what sounded like embarrassment. The kind of reaction that came from decent people realizing they'd been part of something wrong without knowing it. I sat down at the table again and opened my laptop. Emails continued to pour in from vendors, each one now CCing not just Celeste and my parents, but Garrett's family as well. Cancelled contracts, unpaid balances, returned checks. The whole house of cards was visible to everyone now, laid bare for all to see. I scrolled through them calmly, reading each one before closing it, treating them like mission reports. Factual, unemotional, complete. Outside, the sun slid lower in the sky, turning the street a soft gold. A breeze carried the smell of cut grass through the open window, sweet and fresh. I let it fill my lungs, grounding myself in the moment. My phone chimed once more, another text from Celeste. "He's threatening to call off the wedding. This is your fault. All of it. Do you hear me? Your fault." I typed back one word, the only response that mattered. "No." Then I locked the screen and set the phone aside. The neighbor across the way called his kids in for dinner, their voices fading as they ran inside. A lawnmower started up somewhere down the block, its steady drone filling the evening air. Normal life rolled on while the chaos inside my phone reached its peak, the two worlds existing in parallel but no longer touching. I stood, pulled my running shoes on again, and headed outside. The sky was streaked pink and orange now, the heat of the day finally beginning to break. I started jogging down the block, each step steady and purposeful. At the end of the street, I turned onto a dirt trail that ran along the marsh, the path familiar from my earlier runs. The smell of salt water rose up strong, and gulls cried overhead, wheeling in the fading light. With every stride, my mind cleared further. The years of quiet transfers, of pretending it was fine, of telling myself that family meant always saying yes no matter the cost. All of it loosened like a knot being worked free. My boots had walked across deserts and flight lines, had carried gear heavier than some of my fellow soldiers could manage. This emotional weight was different, but it had been constant, pressing down on me for so long I'd stopped noticing it was there. I slowed at a bend where the trail opened onto a small wooden pier and leaned on the railing, looking out at the water. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. The tide moved in slow ripples, reflecting the fading sky in shades of pink and purple. A memory rose unbidden. Sitting in a plywood office overseas, my uniform soaked with sweat, wiring money home on a cracked phone screen while Celeste texted me about cake tastings and colour schemes. I'd thought to myself, if this helps her be happy, it's worth it. Now she was screaming threats about lawsuits and telling me I'd destroyed her life. I drew a long, deep breath and let it out slowly. The air smelled of brine and pine, sharp and clean. My shoulders loosened another degree. Turning back, I jogged toward the house, the sky deepening to purple behind me. Porch lights blinked on one by one. The sound of crickets replaced the gulls, their song rising as the temperature dropped. My lungs burned pleasantly from the run, the good kind of burn that came from pushing yourself just enough. When I walked back inside, the kitchen lights were soft against the darkening windows. My phone sat on the counter blinking with new notifications. I didn't reach for it right away. Instead, I filled a glass of water from the tap, drank it slowly and set it down with deliberate care. Only then did I glance at the screen. Garrett had texted again, just 2 words. "We're done." I placed the phone face down without replying, without feeling the need to respond or clarify or explain. The refrigerator hummed its steady background noise. Outside, a car door slammed and someone laughed, the sound carrying through the warm evening air. Inside, the house held still, thick with the smell of sweat and salt from my run and something else. Peace, maybe, or just the absence of obligation. I went to the window and looked out at the street, at the porch lights casting long shadows, at the ordinary lives unfolding in the houses around mine. The red mark on my cheek was completely gone now, not even a faint trace left. My reflection in the glass looked like someone who had finally stopped flinching, someone who'd stood their ground and lived to tell about it. The phone stayed silent for a long moment before buzzing once more. Another notification sliding across the screen. I let it sit there, glowing faintly against the counter as the rooms settled into quiet around me. As the evening deepened and the world outside my window continued on, steady and unbothered and free.